seance took place, but indications were that it, was not too long after. So we're told that it takes time for spirits to awaken to the reality of the afterlife. Frederick Myers, one of the early psychical researchers, communicated with Sir Oliver Lodge several months after his death, and he said it was all darkness at first, and he was floundering. He couldn't even remember his mother's name when he was talking to Lodge. So others have said the same thing. They don't necessarily remember names any more than they did on Earth. So that's another possibility.
Yeah.
And it may be that, well, this is a separate one, but overlaps, that Edison had a limited memory. He couldn't, he couldn't remember the 10 words. If you gave me 10 words today, I probably forget 9 of them by tomorrow. And indications are that, I had to change my password on my computer last week, and the next day I forgot what the heck it was. I mean, I've had 200 yes. passwords, and I get variations of these passwords, and thinking I'm going to remember what they are, but then I forget them. And I think it's the same way in the afterlife. You just don't remember the words anymore or names any more than you do when you're here. So those, and the one that I ended with was necessary doubt. There are indications that we're not supposed to have absolute proof. That having a little doubt helps us in our challenges here. If we knew for certain, 100% certainty that we're going to live on after death, we might our free will decisions might be different than they would as long as we have that little doubt. So it may be that Edison realized this and therefore saw no need to communicate.
Did he ever communicate with anyone?
I understand he did communicate with the Skoll. In fact, somebody left a comment yesterday, and I haven't had time to check it out, with the Skoll researchers in England during the late 1990s, that he did communicate with them, and I was going to look that up and see what he did say, but I haven't had time to do that yet.
It seems to me that there are tremendous barriers to communication. It's kind of a wonder that we get any communications at all. Circumstances have to be exactly right. I think the main thing is the sort of close spiritual connection we have with our relatives. And when people try to communicate with a famous individual, it's just very difficult. There's just no way around it.
Right.
And many people want to communicate with him.
Link.
Yeah, that there has to be that even being able to find someone who has been a famous person is very difficult.
Definitely.
There's no way to find them.
I really put down four separate issues in this regard. The first one being harmony. We're constantly told that there has to be that harmony. That's why they sing. They say prayers, and they wait around. Hamlin Garland was one of the early researchers, and he details this more than anybody else. He said there were times when he waited for 3 hours before, they'd sing, they'd wait, they'd talk, nothing happened, and then about 3 hours later, all of a sudden something started to happen. But by that time, people had given up. I mean, the average researcher wouldn't sit around for 3 hours if nothing happened in the first 15 minutes, and then it figured it's all, fraudulent and time to leave. And I have to confess, I bought a Ouija board one time about 20 years ago, and played around with it for about 15 minutes, and nothing happened. And I haven't taken the Ouija board out again since then.
Yeah, I'd say you don't have a lot of patience. My goodness. No, I've always been leery of them because I've heard stories. As I imagine you must have too.
Yeah. Uh-huh. But I think, there are reports of good information coming through Ouija boards if you have the right attitude and you're alert to the possibility that there could be a devious earthbound spirit on the other side. If you're ready for that and skeptical in that regard, it might work. I mean, Geraldine Cummins, one of the most famous automatic writing mediums, started with the Ouija board, and Hester Dowden, who was actually Geraldine's teacher, wrote a couple of books about everything she got from the Ouija board, and it was, pretty interesting and credible.
Does it take two people? I'm not really very familiar with them. Or can you do it alone?
I think you can do it alone. I just haven't paid that much attention to it. I mean, I just did that on a whim, like I say, about 20 years ago, and I haven't been very successful in any of my efforts. As we've discussed on prior interviews, I had one very good reading with a clairvoyant in England, 1999, I think it was, but the other ones were very general and not too meaningful for me. But my feeling is I've never felt the need to communicate with any of my deceased relatives, and I think that's part of it. I mean, I haven't grieved that much, and I feel guilty because I haven't grieved. I mean, my parents, my brother,
know where they are, so
yeah. Yeah.
I don't grieve either. I'm real happy for them.
Yeah.
I said that to my mother when she was about to go. I said, "Lucky you, Mom."
Yeah.
She thought I was crazy because she was terrified to die. I was trying to cheer her up. I mean, I feel bad for people who are afraid to die. It's not the right attitude to have. It's like this is my going home day. This is exciting.
Right.
She didn't feel that way though.
That's the way it was with my mother. I mean, she had dementia for the last 7 years. So when she she died. She was in a rest home in Berkeley, California, and I went down at Thanksgiving time to bring her up to my home in Oregon, where I was living at the time, and it was time to take her back. And we had her up on the second floor, and she had a wheelchair, so I had to carry her downstairs. And as I started walking downstairs, take her out to the car, her head just went back, and her eyes rolled back in her head, and that was it. I think she just decided that that was a good time to go, and
good time.
And I feel guilty that I didn't, it didn't bother me more than it did.
I didn't even cry. My mother she had lost all her activities of daily living. And I just was saying, in my mind, I was thinking, oh, Mom, just let go. But she was so afraid to die. I read The Fun of Dying to her, and she couldn't go. And then finally, she had to go in her sleep. She held on too much when she was awake. She couldn't leave that way. Mm-hmm. And the first thing she said to me when I finally contacted her through a medium was, "You were right about everything." Well, thanks, Mom.
Uh-huh.
And she said, but she was still traveling around checking the details to make sure I hadn't made any mistakes. Talk about a mother. Golly, that's what mothers do.
Right. But another area here that, besides the harmony, I think is the frequency involved in communication. We're told by various spirits, credible spirits, supposedly, that the more advanced the spirit, the more difficult it is for that spirit to communicate. It's the lower spirits, at least initially, if they're lower before they, it seems like there's an awakening period that they can communicate better than later on. But if they're really enlightened spirits or advanced spirits, they are, they're at too high a frequency to communicate with us.
Another problem. Yeah.
They have to relay messages through lower level spirits.
And then there's Mikey Morgan, who is 6th level, and he deliberately took that lifetime just so he could communicate through his mom. And the only way that they could work it out was with a pendulum, which is another thing, which apparently is a bad idea. You can call in all kinds of negative entities with those.
Right.
And one time, he trained her to always say, Mikey, Mikey, only my son Mikey. One day she forgot to do that, and she got, who knew what kind of odd being that suddenly was doing all kinds of weird things with the pendulum. And he had to show up and say, Mom, you're supposed to call for me first. And he got rid of whatever was the other being that was playing with the pendulum. So people listening have to be careful when you try to use. I've heard from people since who have watched the video. There's a video on seekreality.com about with Mikey of Carol and Mikey communicating, and people try it at home. And if you try it, that's great, but you've got to call for your specific loved one very, very carefully and firmly, because if you don't, if you just say, hey, anybody who wants to come, I want to chat with whoever, you don't know who you're going to get, and it can be very hard to get rid of them once they home in on you. So you have to only call for your own loved ones.
Right.
So how else can people, other than with physical medium, mental mediums, how else can people communicate? I guess I don't really know. I don't even think about it because I have no interest, as you say, you don't either, in talking to my own loved ones. I know they're having too much fun anyway. They don't want to come and talk to boring old me.
Yeah, well, there are different types of mediumship, as you know. I mean, automatic writing is considered
right.
One form of mediumship, and there's direct voice mediumship. I mean,
right.
Today's clairvoyance is about all we hear about, and the average person today would think that, that clairvoyance is the only form of mediumship, the kind we see on TV with John Edward. I don't even know who's on today, if anybody, the Long Island medium and so forth. It's
right.
Clairvoyance only, and then that's quite different from the old trans mediumship, the direct voice mediumship,
yes.
Automatic writing and so forth. I think that some of that is still going on today, but it's not as frequent as it was 100 or so years ago. And the reason is that, as Reverend Stanton Moses, who was an Anglican priest, was one of the more well-known mediums of that era from the late 1800s. He was told by his spirit guides that they were giving up and trying to communicate because people weren't accepting it, and there was too much interference by earthbound spirits, that people were accepting what the earthbound spirits had to say. So there apparently is a reason for warnings in the Bible to say that beware of speaking with the dead and so forth. I think we talked about this before. The word dead in the Bible, where it says don't speak with the dead, or the dead know nothing, referred to spiritually dead, meaning
yes,
low-level spirits or earthbound spirits who weren't conscious enough to know what the heck they were talking about.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
Religions have interpreted that word dead to mean all dead, not just the spiritually dead.
Right. And, well, Craig Hogan has, who's my partner in seekreality.com, has had a home circle going for, I don't know, a decade and a half or something. And he has developed some very good physical mediums and trance mediums. But no, I don't think there are any that perform for the public, really, not anymore. Very few, if any. And that's unfortunate, because the ones during the heyday, which was more than 100 years ago, 120 years ago, maybe, there were some wonderful phenomena that they were able to produce. Quite amazing.
Yeah, we still hear of it here and there, but as you said, the mediums, they realize that, if they bring researchers in or scientists, that it's, there's some of it that's just not going to they're not going to understand.